Welcome to a special podcast YouTube presentation where I'm talking with Sam Juliano, an old friend and a colleague, fellow traveler in the old school blogosphere from the 2000s and into the present. We're going to talk about his love of film, what got him into writing about film, and actually appearing in a few films as well over the years. And we're also going to then talk about his two books. He just released his second one. There's a third one on the way. They are, I would call them sort of memoiristic, somewhat fantastical novels. Does that sound about right to you, Sam?
Yes, I can go with
Okay.
that.
Okay, good.
Sure.
So we'll talk a little about those. And then in the end, we're going to talk about some films that are out now, that are out this year. He goes a lot more regularly than I do. So I'm going to pick his brain a little on that, see what he thinks maybe is headed for year-end awards attention and things like that. He has for years done infamous kind of Oscar presentation or Oscar prediction, I should say, videos and Oscar parties at his home in New Jersey. So I guess to start off with, tell the listeners or the viewers what what your background is that led you to the present day, and I think the through line from your childhood to your work online and your novels and so forth.
Well, and my name is Sam Juliano. Of course, I've been around a while. I'm 69 years old now, so I've been, I've done a lot of things in my life, and I became a teacher rather late. I was in my late 20s.
Mhm.
I had been going to college part time, so I didn't get my teacher certificate until I was 28. And then at that point, I immediately secured a job in a high school teaching English and literature to ninth and 10th graders. But then after 2 years there, I came back to my hometown to teach in the system that I'm in now. And
Yeah,
I've,
for 40 years, right?
well, close to it,
Wow.
39, sure. And I teach in a grammar school now where my wife serves as the principal, and it's in my hometown. It's it's called the Number Three School Annex. It's a former parochial school building from the building St. John's was the church that had their own school, but then when they lost their enrollment, they leased this building to the town because our enrollment is always on the increase. We're building a new school now, which they should be breaking ground on that within 6, 8 months.
And your
After
town, your town is Fairview, New Jersey, right?
That's correct. It's a short distance, very short distance from the George Washington Bridge, which connects northeastern New Jersey with Manhattan.
And when you were a kid, I know you were a huge movie buff. Did you go into the city a lot to catch screenings, or did you mostly watch films kind of closer to home? I mean, I know New York City is pretty close to home, so maybe that's the same question. But did you take a lot of trips to the city and have memorable cinematic experiences there?
Yes, I did. I started going when I got my driver's license. I actually did see in early 1970 Midnight Cowboy
Oh
on
wow!
42nd Street,
Oh
and
my
I was
God!
16, and the problem there was it was rated X,
Yeah.
but somehow I was allowed to go in.
Oh, that's
And I
wild.
was 16, and I got told many times over there. I've been told from my movie excesses. I saw A Clockwork Orange at the Cinema 3 on 3rd Avenue, and that was one of the times where I came out of the movie and my car was gone. It was towed.
Oh no. Oh, okay. I mean, that's not good, but I thought that was going somewhere else at first.
No, it's just that I had to get used to New York City's Byzantine, traffic regulations and so on. When to park, when not to park. I was too young to figure that all out. I learned my lesson the hard way, though. But in those
Yeah.
early days, it was just getting into the movie theater that I was concerned about.
Well, someone was telling me recently, it might have been you, a kind of a quintessential New York joke, which is, nobody in New York drives. There's too much traffic.
Yeah, well, and that was true back in back in the early 70s, and it only got worse and worse. But
Yeah.
I know now because I still go over there often to see films,
Yeah.
especially at this time of the year. I know where to park. So I don't have that
Oh
problem.
yeah. The definitely something you learn over the years. So you used to go, and I know you still do, to like the New York Film Festival and stuff, right? Like these sort of big events in the city, often where they're having screenings.
Yes, I'm a veteran of many different festivals at the Film Forum, at the Quad. Um, Prior to that, before they closed the New Yorker and the Thalia uptown on Broadway around 80th Street, they had festivals. In fact, when I went to college, I saw an Ingmar Bergman festival at the New Yorker. It was a very comprehensive one.
Oh
But
wow.
all through the years, I've gone to different festivals, and in the last 11 years, I've been a regular at the Tribeca Film Festival because I have passes that are connected to my site Wonders in the Dark. So I have free passes to attend the Tribeca, and I usually go with my wife. The last few years, I've done it virtually, however, because of
Yeah.
the restrictions.
Yeah, the pandemic must have put a dent in some of those habits, I'm sure.
Yes, it did. It even volume wise, it has cut down the number of trips I've made into the city, the number of films I've seen in the city, and as a result, I've watched a lot of the movies in the last 4 years online at home, on a
Hmm.
70-inch screen, which is just
Hmm.
a wonderful way to watch it too. But yeah, the outside screenings have yielded to the virtual, the at home screenings.
What do you, having experienced now over 5 decades of cinema going, what do you was like the golden age, not necessarily of movies, although you can answer that too if you want, but like of going to the movies for you, I guess particularly in the city.
Well, as I alluded to before in one of the other questions, New York City in the 70s
Hmm.
and then well into the 80s and even in some instances further than that, New York City always had one of the great cultural aspects of the city was a champion of art house cinema.
Hmm.
We've had great art house cinemas that have closed. The Lincoln Plaza Cinemas is an example across from Lincoln Plaza, and they would always have first run art house and foreign films. And as I mentioned earlier, the Thalia and the New Yorker, and then there were more theaters, sprinkled around the Beekman, the Cinema One, the Cinema Two, the Coronet, uh, the Sutton. These were art house theaters or first run theaters in Manhattan that I frequented. And the city was vibrant back in the 70s and the 80s. And, that's an age where to see movies, you would really want to see them in the theater, where the other options that came later on
Hmm.
diminished that. I mean, there's
Hmm.
still some great art house and repertory cinemas. This film forum is thriving. The Quad is there. There's one called the Metrograph, which is close to Brooklyn. It's on the other, the far east end of the city. There's the Angelica Film Center, which is always there's the Cinema Village.
Yeah. Yeah, I
These are
remember a
all
lot of those from when I
yes.
lived there in the 2000s. There were still, a lot of great art house options, but it does feel like the, 30 years earlier than that, it was like just an even more of a mecca.
There's one other one that I forgot to mention, which is it's one of the majors, the IFC Film
Mhm.
Center.
Yeah, I
The
remember.
IFC Film
I
Center.
think
Yeah.
I saw Hard Day's Night there back around the 40th anniversary. Now,
Uh-huh.
so to give some of the listeners an idea of like your own personal taste. I mean, I would say it's hard to narrow it down because you're very eclectic in what you're interested in, what you write about. Would you say though that you have certain favorite genres or filmmakers or areas of focus that you consider kind of a specialty?
Yes, with and this dates back decades. I've always had a special affection and interest in international cinema, films that are subtitled, films that Italian films, French films, Polish films, and Latin American films, and so on. It always was intriguing to me to have the opportunity with the melting pot
Hmm.
of New York City to see films that did not open, stateside, that open overseas and were brought over here. And it's to this day I have a special affection for those kind of films. But I mean, I also, there are genres that I'm well known for favoring, like musicals and horror and screen romances and film noir. I basically I appreciate just about every genre. I mean, documentaries. I'm not as studied in those, but I do see the major releases every year. I just wish I was more involved in seeing a lot of those because there are documentary festivals in the city. But I'm all over the map. I'm all over the map. I like films that focusing on students and teaching and young people. I always favor that. The 400 Blows by Truffaut is one of my favorite films of all time. But there's so many others that that have that subject matter that I champion.
So in 2008, you started Wonders in the Dark. We're going to start talk about that in a moment. But before we get to that, I'm kind of curious. Did you like, what was your method of engaging with films like before there was the internet? Like before, did you ever write about things for any, I don't know, newspapers or anything? Or was it always just sort of a personal pursuit and you would talk about it with friends, but there was nothing like pen to paper, recorder on, like no kind of record of your thoughts on what you were seeing?
Well, actually, I was the arts editor of my school newspaper, and I wrote reviews, film
Ah,
reviews, as early as 1973. I remember it's clear in my head.
yeah.
A banner headline of the Bergen Community College Monitor, and I was talking about the best movies of 1973, and I remember writing Jan Troll's The New Land, Gutierrez Elia's Memories of Underdevelopment, and Franco Zeffirelli's Brother, Sun, Sister Moon lead the list of the best movies of 1973. And then I talked about each one of those films. But I was able to secure passes from the major studios, including Warner Brothers and Paramount, as film the film critic for the college paper. And I would go
Oh,
over into
nice.
the city and go into screening rooms. That's why I saw The Emigrants of the New Land in screening rooms in Manhattan. So I had a connection
Yeah.
writing reviews all the way back into the 70s, well before we had Facebook and the internet and emails and of course blog sites, way before that. I was writing about films back then. Then I used my influence in town because I was involved in politics, that I had the school put out a newspaper 4 times a year,
Oh, good.
and I wrote film reviews for that newspaper. And that was part of what I did for them, and that was for years. I did that as well.
Have you kept
They had
records
used
of all
Telegram.
those pretty
What's
well?
that?
Yeah, have you kept records pretty well of all of your previous writing? Like, do you have it all stored away somewhere?
I
Or?
wish I had more of it.
Mm.
I lost track of some of it. A friend of mine collected them though, and has possession of some of the writings. For when I wrote for two different colleges, I wrote for Bergen Community College and Jersey City State College, which is where I finished my undergraduate degree there. I wrote for their paper as well, film reviews and theater reviews. And then I started to write opera reviews,
Hmm.
and then of course when we got into the 90s, then of course then my outlet became, it expanded more in the ways that we well know how they expanded. And I've been writing for since the 70s, since I was maybe 18, 19 years old. I've been writing. It's not something new.
So one of the themes I feel like just throughout your life in the work you've done on Wonders in the Dark, in the way that you tell your story, which is set in Fairview, and I think I'm sure somewhat loosely, but based on sort of your time period of growing up and all of that, is community building, bringing very different, sometimes contentious people together and kind of creating this environment where everybody is kind of excited and sharing ideas back and forth. And I'll say for me, that was a big part of the appeal of Wonders in the Dark. So I guess to fast forward to that, in 2008, you started this site, this blog, this film discussion, forum basically. And it did feel like a forum because people would write reviews and then there'd be just as much discussion, or if not more, in the comments below. And one of the centerpieces of that was a kind of a character, I guess we could say, that we can bring in at this point, which was your friend Alan Fish, who at that point you had not, I believe you had not yet met in person. But let's tell the listeners a little bit about Alan and how you came together and how that kind of kicked things off with Wonders.
Yes, it was just a sort of a freak connection that just started to mushroom. All it really was at that time I was buying and selling. Although I didn't charge that much, I put VHSs on eBay, and then I would use whatever money I made to buy other
Mm-hmm.
videos and films. So I had a couple of films up there, which were VHS copies of Mizoguchi's film, Kenji Mizoguchi, the Japanese director. And I found a better copy than the one I had. So I put the home vision copy of Sancho the Bailiff, AKA Sancho Dayu, and I put that up on eBay. And, within a day or two, somebody I saw bought it, and the person was from Britain. His name was Alan Fish. So I sent him a message. I said, "You got it. The video is yours. I'll mail it out to you. Can you give me your address?" And then I said, "By the way," I said, "are you just a collector, or do you like Mizoguchi? Because he's one of my favorite directors." That started dialogue. "Oh, well, I do this. I like this. And yeah, he's one of my favorites." And sure enough, we get back and forth emails. And then he told me that he wrote capsule reviews, that he was going to write a book, and he was collecting reviews, and he wanted me to see some of them. So he sent them to me via email. And I right away noticed that he had a acute talent of saying so much in so few words. He was a very talented writer. And to this day, he was a master of what he did, the short review. I'm not saying that he's, in a league with people who write long essays and go deep into the. He just didn't live long enough or do enough for me to make that, to give him that kind of a compliment. But for what he did, he was unique. He said so much in so little. But anyways, we needed to do more than just exchange email. So then it was set up that I would call him on the phone. He gave me his phone after he had sent me pictures of his friends and his mother. And what happened was, he gave me his phone number and I called him. But at that time, I called him on my house phone. I wasn't aware that it would be costly.
Oh
And I spoke to him
yeah.
a couple
Yeah.
of hours.
Oh yeah. I've been there
And then
before.
I got a phone bill of almost $800 that I had to pay. And I
Yeah.
sent him an email. I said, I wasn't pointing any fingers because, I thought the
Yeah.
joke was on me. My wife says, "Oh, my God." So I sent him an email. I said, "You're not going to believe what happened." And him and his wife, and not his wife, he was not married. Him and his mother, he lived with his mother in Kendal, which is about 20 miles south, quaint little town south of the Scottish border. He says, um, Oh, we can't believe that happened. The mother was mortified, him and the mother, and they send me some free DVDs at the time or videos, whatever, because we started to send videos back and forth. So he spent money on some videos.
Yeah.
But of course, it was a running joke for years that first phone call was like, I went for my lungs, so to speak. But a short time after that, and yes, you were correct. Before we met in person, we did subsequently meet two times in person, and then a third time. He came over here on a plane twice and stayed for 3 weeks, two times living in our house, and then we returned there in 2014 when we visited Britain and
Mm.
stayed a week by him, and he came with us into London for a week. But anyways, to get back to the inception of the site, we were, he was sending me stuff back and forth and back and forth. Then we got so friendly that we started getting on each other's nerves. And Alan has a way of, when he feels a certain way, he's not afraid to tell you how he thinks. And sometimes he could be really ornery about it. So I said to him, I've been very involved online with blog sites. And I've been making my opinions known on film blog sites. I thought of the idea of starting a film blog site. And then he right away says, no, 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 that's a lot of work and it's not worth it. But then I was determined to do it. And I came up with the name Wonders of the Dark. And I eventually convinced him to join, although to this day, I say that the site was co-founded. It really wasn't co-founded. I founded it, and then I begged him to join. And after a few months, he came.
Mm-hmm.
He jumped on line with me and says, "Well, I'm going to give you some of my reviews from the book I'm writing. Certain ones I'm going to give you to start posting."
And whose
And he
idea
started
was it?
posting.
I was going to say, whose idea was it to organize it as decade countdowns, where you would pick the best films of each decade, and he would count down, so it was like you didn't know what number one was going to be, and there was suspense, because that was kind of a fun approach to it, I think, to organize what he'd already written for other purposes.
Yes, he was the organizer of that poll. The only problem with that poll was, there was some weeks where we only got 4, 5, or 6 people that cast votes
Hmm.
on it, even though our site otherwise at that time was bursting with energy and people and hundreds of comments in the sections in our countdown reviews. And that site was vibrant. So many people went to it, comments, and treating people with respect. Right along was and being friendly to everybody. I think that brought that community together. But right now I've run those polls, those annual polls,
Hmm.
uh, yearly poll at my on my Facebook page, and I've got like 10 times as many people who respond. It's a different situation now with social media, but back in the Wonders in the Dark days, and maybe I'm confusing it a little bit. Maybe you weren't talking about the annual polls. Rather, you were talking about the decade polls or the genre polls, like the 100 greatest musicals or 100 greatest westerns, 100 greatest childhood films and
Hmm.
science fiction, horror. All of those countdowns were very successful because people went on there and wrote essays. We had people from all over the internet. We had Ed Howard, I remember, Jason Bellamy. Uh, we had Roderick Heath and Marilyn Ferdinand. These were premium. J.D. LaFrance and somebody that wrote for Slant magazine was always there. His name is John Lanthier. And they all came and they wrote. They wrote for our countdowns. We were able to, get together some of the finest film writers in the blogger ranks. And they all wrote. We had great responses, and that went on for years. It eventually died out, but less for the fact that Alan got sick and passed away than that whole form
Hmm.
yielded to social media.
Oh,
That's what.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That was my experience as well. Is there was a period of like, I think before 2008, but 2008 was when you and I both joined and started our own sites. And from then to like maybe 2011, 2012, it was like individual blog sites and people would comment on each other's site. And that was like the community. And then after that, the past decade or so, it was all Facebook, Twitter, it was other platforms, people kind of communicating there, and it did shift the sort of center of gravity. But
Uh-huh.
when we were talking about polls, I guess I had a few things in mind. One was what you're talking about, where we would vote on like our favorite films of a certain genre, and then different people would submit different pieces. But also to start off with, with I think what kind of got the ball rolling with the site was Alan's reviews would be organized by his ranking of what he thought like the best films of a decade were, and then we would also vote on them separately. So it was funny because he had very eclectic taste. Like there were some very kind of obvious choices in there, and then some total out of left field obscure films, and it was a really wonderful mix because he could bring you in from any direction. Like I remember in the 60s, his number one film was Eros plus Massacre, which I had never even heard of up to that point. So, all of these other great films coming up, and what's number one going to be? And that one kind of came in out of left field, and he would do that a lot. And it was very sincere. It wasn't just for show. These were the films he loved. And yeah, there was something really exciting about that. And I feel like that really got some momentum going in those early days of like, what's the next film going to be, in addition to enjoying the pieces that he wrote and the comments that you and me and others would write on there, and all of that.
Yeah, I remember Eros plus Massacre, and he was also very big with Jacques Rivette. He had
Yeah.
Duel up there. I think for one, I don't remember. It was the '70s. Was it Duel that was his number one? But he was big on Japanese cinema in general. He was a major proponent of that. In fact, his mother used to always tell me emails, and then we were over there. He goes, "Oh, he loves those Japanese films. He's got them on all night long watching them." He was a big. That country was his arguably his favorite. I mean, he did say that he thought France and the United States had the most volume, but he loved his Japanese cinema. And that film that you mentioned in particular, he did set it up the way you said it. He would do it in order of what he thought was the best. So he took the role as the ringleader, as the guy, and he was a forceful guy. He was very strong opinions.
One of the things I wanted to talk about is how uh, I think something that I noticed in your book, which I'll have you describe in a moment, but which we can talk about generally first, is that interest in kind of clashing personalities in a way that feed off of each other. So did you have anything, I guess, in mind, like relationships in your own life? I mean, obviously, you're not um, the sort of saintly martyr that the character in the book is, and Alan is not this, devious arch villain that this other character is. But, nonetheless, did you kind of have dynamics like that in mind when you wrote the book?
Well, the book was nothing in Alan's personality or character was carried over into any of the characters in that book. I wasn't thinking of Alan when I conceived of the book. I was thinking of my hometown and growing up in my hometown and the way things were, in the 60s and 70s that I remember. There was a lot of, macho behavior in the town. There was gangs and there was uh, they were the families were very closely knit, but there was a lot of bullying that was going on, among the adolescents, and I brought a lot of that in. I created the characters. The one character who was the toxic character who committed those violent acts and set up the main character. He was based loosely on someone who had the same last name, Gorman, that
Ah,
lived in
okay.
town.
Interesting.
And he spent time in a mental facility. I'm pretty sure he's deceased now, but he had a lot of issues, family problems, and there was a lot of in the house. There was violence, and the police were always called to go over there. So I loosely based the character on him. Of course, he didn't have the epiphany, the spiritual epiphany, and that he had in the second book, and he became very religious. That didn't happen to the original person, but that's where fiction comes in. I mean,
Right.
my main character, Adam Sean Ferrano, is not based on any person that I know. It was a complete fictional creation that I developed, and I built some themes around that character, his behavior, some of the main themes of the book. But
Yeah.
no, it was not based on my chemistry or the dynamic of Wonders in the Dark. It was more of a local
Yeah,
story, a
of
coming of
course.
age story.
I guess to clarify, I don't mean to say, that again, that this was like you and Alan or something, because obviously the characters are very different. But more just, I guess I'm curious, do you think you're drawn in a certain way to those kind of dynamics that you get when sort of large but very different personalities come into contact with one another? Like, do you see that as a consistent kind of interest of yours, both in life and in art?
Yes, I am interested in that kind of dynamic because it's clashing, and there's a lot of differences, and it lends itself to a lot of dynamic scenes. Some of the violence in the book developed from these completely different characters. One who had a loving family. He was a very positive person, a lot of positive energy. He thought everybody was good. And whereas the other one was just, he was harmed by his own family strife. And, he was very cynical and very, very critical. And, he was driven by a lot of macho things. He's a homophobe and had racial tendencies. So when you put that in the mix, it's a toxic mix, and it's going to result in some of the changes that happened. And one of the main character, who's the goody two shoes, the one who always thinks positively, he changed during the course of the book because he was happy go lucky, but then he became very sullen. After he had a physical impairment, and he didn't exude the kind of optimism that he did in the first book, but he was still as good as ever underneath. But in showing it, he became less sure of himself. His self-confidence eroded as a result of some of the things that happened to him when he developed a stutter after he went into a coma after falling off the amusement park ride. And that was affecting his most prideful aspect, that he was able to communicate so well. So then he lost confidence, and that set in motion that the story, where so many things happen in that story, so many events and confrontations and some physical attacks, and people almost lose their eyesight. Somebody has a stroke, another person has a heart attack, and so many of the events that actually, some of them happened in the 70s, that I just
Hmm.
fictionalized them.
So tell us a little bit about these two books, the process of writing and what led to them, and what you drew on in terms of like influences of other works, but also, as you said, your own experience. The first of these, Paradise Atop the Hudson, came out in 2021, and you just released the second one, The Irish Jesus of Fairview.
Right. Well, I started writing Paradise Atop the Hudson um, maybe around 12 months before it released. So, I mean, you're talking about November or December of 2020, which was right around the time we were hit with the pandemic. And I was at school and I had to do different activities and read to students online. They weren't coming to the school for, that we almost the whole year was wiped out. And there was time. I had some downtime here after the virtual engagements with the students. I started to think to myself, this is a time where I could put together some writing. I always wanted to write a novel about Fairview or a book about Fairview. Then I decided it would be presented by way of a fictional novelization where I would include some real life people, but most of the characters were fictional characters. But I would stay attuned to the towns, the areas, various activities growing up during that time, what happened in the town, sports leagues, churches, municipal happenings, where people ate, where people spent time, where, as I say, where they attended mass. And I decided that I would, make a major statement with a family, and each person in the family would have their own, characteristics, how they, interact, and make one of the characters a standout person who was very high in morality, who was just a loving person, always believed everybody was good. And then how the way he thought he was tested by all the outside influences, the forces of evil, the forces of temptation. So when I started writing, I wrote a few chapters that were not the first chapters of the book. They were just things that had happened with these characters. That this had Adam Ferrano meeting Jimbo, and Jimbo's family chapter where he had trouble with his father was one of the first chapters I wrote. It was at that time that I came away with the central plot device of that first book, which was to have this very, very world famous amusement park that closed here in 1971, Palisades Amusement Park, well known throughout the whole country. It's just a town away. I could literally walk to it. And it was right up on the cliffs across from Manhattan. And I realized that would be a great appeal to have these boys go up to Palisades Amusement Park. And then I came up with the idea of him going on the Wild Mouse and that, his seatbelt was unbuckled. How did I come up with that crazy idea? I was unduly influenced by one of my favorite books growing up, a book that I taught called A Separate Peace by
Yeah.
John Knowles. And many people have read that book growing up in high school or in junior high school. And it's about two boys in a prep school in New Hampshire, Exeter Academy, Phillips Exeter Academy, and a very famous boys prep school. And
That's actually the town I was born in.
is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
A couple towns over from where I live.
Wow. Well, I'm sure you know the story where the one student shakes a tree branch out of a fit. It's sort of like a jealous rage that he just shakes the branch and causing his best friend to fall out of the tree where he breaks his leg. And then he's sent into the infirmary, and then that sets the whole plot going. But it was a twisted action that came out of nowhere. So that inspired me, that event, in my book, to have him unbuckle, an unconscionable act, unbuckle. Who ever heard of such a thing? Unbuckle a seatbelt.
Right.
On a roller coaster. You never heard of something so ridiculous. But that's where I got the idea, because that was a very, very important event in the book. Because the bookends of the book, the first two chapters are set in the amusement park when that happens. But then the last several chapters of the book, except for the last chapter after that. But late in the book, you go back to the amusement park and all of the drama that played out after the accident and the coma when the character came out of the coma and so on. So I didn't write the book in order. What I did was I wrote it episodically. I wrote different things that they did. I didn't know what order to play it. And then after all these different chapters were written, I started ordering them and then filling in plot holes, gaps in the narrative, writing other things to fill it in to connect it. So that was a big job in connecting everything that was written separately.
What was
So
it
that,
that, or sorry, keep going. Yeah.
yes, no, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, what was it that surprised you the most from that beginning stage to where you ended up? Like, what was something that sort of organically rose out of the writing that you really didn't think was going to happen, I guess, with characters or story or anything like that?
You mean
Where did you surprise yourself? Put it that way.
well, when I what happened was when this character Jimbo Gorman, this juvenile delinquent, this very violent, who was like 10 times stronger than Adam. Adam was this little frail weakling boy, who wouldn't stand a chance against a female his age, let alone this big bully, who outweighs him 2.5 to 1. When he left his house and I came on the idea that he was going to visit Adam in the hospital. He was going to somehow find a way to get into his hospital room when the police were looking for him. They had cordoned off the street. They had police cars in front of his house. They were trying to locate him, and they never thought he would go right to the hospital to visit Adam. And that was where I came up with the idea that he would first meet this drug dealer who hung around, this older man who was very, very intelligent. He was a good writer, but he was also sort of a druggy guy. His name was Larry. He hung out in a bowling alley, and Jimbo knew him. And Jimbo said Jimbo bought pot off him a few times, and he said to him, "I want to write. I want to write. Speak to my friend who's in a coma. Explain everything that happened to him." And this guy helped him write sort of a speech that he could recite to him at his hospital bed. In this sense, anyone reading the book can't say, well, how is it possible that an uneducated guy like Jimbo Gorman, no matter how streetwise he is, that he'd come up with these ideas and these some fine language and all. So he had help to write it. And then all Jimbo had to do was read what was written for him after he had gone over it with this guy, Larry. So that whole idea, which I'm told by different people who've read the book, the first book, they thought that chapter was, emotionally overwhelming when he went to the hospital and read this once, and then he played MacArthur Park on the box there and the cassette player because he knew that was Adam's favorite song of all times. And he played it to him, and they said, "You're still the one." He used a couple of lines from the song. But I wasn't envisioning him telling Adam, paying tribute to him after the thing. That all came to me as I was writing, how to tie this plot together and to bring some dramatic heft to the proceedings. But by so doing, I probably wrote what most people are saying was the key chapter in the book, the hospital confrontation, where he reads, it's a big, long monologue, which I presented in the book in italics, big, long monologue, where he says, they say that, people don't have a friend like you, like one of them in their whole life. Maybe they have one friend like you in their whole life, and most people don't even have any like you. You had it all, you had this and so on, and he went on. So that to me, that was an idea that came late. I didn't map the whole book out in the beginning. I never wrote a novel before. I didn't have any confidence that I could write anything even worth reading. I mean, I've been writing for years, film reviews, opera reviews, music reviews. I have a fair amount of talent in that capacity, but I didn't, and I had some interesting essays at the site The Sound of Music and so on, based on personal experiences. But
Hmm.
that was maybe what gave me the idea. I used the Sound of Music chapter in the book when we had our Fairview Cinema open, which was loosely based on the essay I wrote for Wonders in the Dark on the film, The Sound of Music. But this was all, everything came together later on. You write a lot of chapters, they stick together, you fill in holes, you come up with ideas as you move forward. And I'll have to rely on that strategy for the third book now, because I'm just loosely writing some chapters in the third book. Then as I move forward, I'll come up with ideas. But what happened was, when I wrote the first book, I wrote a lot of other further chapters because I didn't know when to stop writing. And what I realized, that where I needed to end in the living room with the parents, when Adam was carried up the stairs by his wife, dressed in pajamas, with a baby bottle in his mouth, and and he's shaking a rattle. That was supposed to be this big bizarre uh, final scene, but then I had written other scenes. Then I said all those other chapters I had written. I realized when I released Paradise that the second book was probably 50% written already.
Yeah.
And then I just needed to add to it to finish out Irish Jesus of Fairview.
Yeah, that sequence you mentioned was very made me think of Fellini quite a bit. And then I feel like there was also some Almodovar in there, and I think you or someone who blurbed the book in the beginning mentioned Bresson, this idea of like Mouchette, this character who just suffers and suffers and suffers, and the way that that Adam does, probably somewhat less cheerful in the interim between the suffering than in Bresson's films cases. There, those are a little
Right.
more singularly unpleasant. But yeah, I saw these kind of fascinating combinations of different storytellers. I guess I was thinking particularly film, but I know there's definitely some novelists in there as well. But storytellers who've influenced you, but who are very different in their kind of style in the world that they are a part of. So it was interesting to see you kind of combine those into this stew, I guess you could say, where it's like you have these very flamboyant elements along with maybe something a little grittier as well.
Yeah, I mean, I spiced it up with some kinky stuff. I mean, that last scene that I described, and in the second book, I had Adam's wife. He was always, because of his heavy drinking and his depression, he was waking up in the middle of the night crying and carrying on. And this tumult was causing the babies to wake up. So, the wife had to come up with some radical solution. Now, this is a man who at the time is 26 years old. So she puts a baby bottle of milk into his mouth, and it's effective. He drinks the bottle and falls asleep. Now, of course, when someone else in the house, the one brother, the macho brother, and then the adopted brother find out, they say, if he isn't the biggest wuss, the biggest sissy, he is a grown man and he's drinking baby bottles. So I thought to myself, am I going to get away with this? And people loved it. They got a big charge out of it, from what I was told anyway. And then he drank another one, I think, when the college professor who took a liking to him, the woman, he's in his literature class. He was supposed to do a Hawthorne presentation, but then he had an emotional meltdown. She wound up feeding him the bottle after the big uncovery scene, the Hercule Poirot scene in book 2, where Sarah, who's a modern day Hercule Poirot, she sits her man down in the living room and she explains about all the lies and deceit and treachery that went on in the house. But one brother wants to become the most loved. He's the more controlling type in the family, and he makes up lies about this Adam, who again Adam with the Christ figure, suffering, long suffering Adam. But now after he has a cosmetic makeover by his wife, who thinks that he should be himself. His hair is dyed, he wears earrings, he's got a butterfly tattoo, and he has this very feminine appearance, but he's not transsexual or transgender or anything like that. He's a father of 3 daughters, and he wants to remain that way. But she just thought it was best that he expressed his inner feelings, and everybody realizes it was a load off his shoulder. But initially, he's met with monstrous hostility in his own house, which his wife portended. She thought that would happen, at least initially. So again, another round of physical and mental abuse.
So
Up by the night of the card game, when he gets beat up by his brother's girlfriend and one of the card players, who was sort of a Judas, because he gave her money in the card game in the first book after she had lost money and the husband was going to go after her, and he gave her money. Now her return favor was to pull his hair and punch him in the gut, abuse him physically and mentally in the bedroom.
yeah, that was kind of an interesting decision, I guess, to have this character where a lot, I think even in the first book where there's that one main antagonist, Jimbo, that you talked about. But even there in that book, there's a sense in which the gender dynamic might be kind of surprising. Like the women in the book are quite assertive and violent sometimes. Like there's not and the character is, like you said, like I don't know, there was something almost it's almost like Poirot, as you described it, where they're like, she's describing the whole conspiracy against him and all of that, but it's like Poirot by way of like R. Crumb or something.
Yeah, well, that's a good way. Well, there were 3 women in the book that were focused in on, outside of the parents, Carol and the Burkes and all. The 3 young women, Sarah was controlling, but her control was based on goodness, on compassion, goodness, love, and so on. So she was the ideal one. But the other 2 women had more issues. Obviously, Yolanda, who turned her Polish American boyfriend, later husband, into a Hispanic by cosmetically altering his appearance. She was driven by, racial prejudice, and she was very, very self-conscious that she was a Hispanic American living in West New York, New Jersey, and she was mistrustful, and she had a bad temper. She was she had a lot of love in her. She went to church. She loved Father Alejandro of St. Joseph's Church in West New York. But she was stoked by racial prejudice. The third girl was the Lady Macbeth. She was, as close to being evil as you can be. That's Olivia. That's Brother Mikey's girlfriend, and she's just, she's this physically strong girl like Yolanda, who she doesn't like effeminate men, and she wrongly calls anyone who's that way a homosexual and gay, and she's always insulting, and she uses her hands as she did in that one scene, and she's just a terrible, terrible human being. Typical that Mikey only went for her because I described it in one chapter that she was basically sex on legs. That's all she was there for, that he could bring her in the bedroom and have his little sessions in his bedroom, and everybody in the house knew what was going on there. But she was, a monstrous person. She said at one point at the end, when she ran out of the house after the big violent scene where she was told to leave, and she tells, if I see that sissy Polak spick boyfriend of yours, I'm going to rip the heart out of his chest. And then Susan Clark says, what a lovely girl. What a lovely girl. Then she leaves. So there were 3 controlling women, each of them had different characteristics. Yolanda was in the middle. She was basically a good person. But you're going to, in book 3, Rose's Desertion that's coming up, she's going to be examined more. And these issues that she has with the feminine side of her husband, Alejandro, are going to come into play. And Alejandro is going to have to, at some point in that book, face the kind of difficulties that his United States doppelganger, remember he was from Krakow, Poland, that his United States, New Jersey doppelganger had to face. So there are parallels between them, a little double life of Veronique kind of thing. But I haven't mapped out exactly what I'm going to be doing, but that's basically where it would go. But all right, I got off of the tangent there.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, there was a lot to discuss. Is Alejandro going to be more the anchor of the third book? Because it did feel to me like Adam finally at the end of 2 books had kind of, his world had somewhat come into order. But I mean, who knows? I could see something popping up again.
Adam is not going to be physically assaulted anymore. I indicated that clearly in the book 2, towards the end of the book, where it was said basically that he had seen everything. He was at peace with himself. The world was at peace with him. They accepted him for who he is, and so on. I mean, somebody might make a few cracks, but Adam is not going to face physical torment anymore, or even mental torment. He's going to become a kindergarten teacher in the 3rd book. That's going to be his job. He's going to teach kindergarten in one of the local schools. It was mentioned, and everybody that read the book knows well, that his wife's parents are, very, very wealthy. Her father worked at Wall Street. He's retired. So, Adam is really set. But you see, Adam doesn't think of money. He's not thinking of solvency or anything. He's just thinking of being happy. So, yes, your question, will Alejandro have to face some of this now rather than Adam? Adam is still going to be a major focus of the book. He was in the first 2 books. He's the main character. It revolves around him. He's not going to recede, but I am going to incorporate the Alejandro character more. I mean, I can even let you know that at some point, I don't know what chapter, but he's going to, he's Alejandro Dominguez. He's going to return to his original last name, Wisniewski. He's going to take his Polish name back. Certain events are going to be set off that are going to make that decision that his wife made is going to be reversed.
Interesting.
That much I do know, but I just don't know yet when and how. But those are the plans there. So he's going to be a major character, as will Rob Murphy, his college friend from Bergen Community College, who was a football player. And Rob's going to rely on Adam, because Rob's going to have some difficulties with his own girlfriend and so on. And he turns to Adam. So Adam is everybody's person when they're in need. They need help. They need attention. They need advice and so on. So he turns to Adam. But these are ideas that are swirling around. But that's basically what the game plan is.
What's
as far as dramatic events? I don't know yet.
Do you have the title yet for the 3rd book?
Yes. The title is Roses for Saoirse. Saoirse Ronan, the famous actress Saoirse. Saoirse is a very well-known and favored Irish girl's name, Ireland, Saoirse. And that's what daughter. Sarah named her Saoirse.
Gotcha.
And why Roses for Saoirse? Well,
I think I can guess why.
Yeah, it's going to be there's going to be a scene where she's handed a bouquet of roses, I think, in the book by Jimbo.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to, you can arbitrarily name a title of a book. You don't have to have an overriding title like Irish Jesus of Fairview, which is more of a blanket title for his character. You could also make a title of your book from just one single incident, that's sort of a microcosm. And so I thought that would be interesting to be more scene specific rather than the usual Paradise Atop the Hudson. That's a general. Iris Jesus of Fairview is a general. The third book is going to have more of a specific title, The Roses for Saoirse, because I think it's a cute little lyrical title that it applies to one of the things that's going to happen in the book.
And calls back to I think is Faulkner, right? Rose for Emily.
To who?
To the what's the short story by, is it Faulkner, A Rose for Emily? And also
Oh, a rose, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
zombies song from that as well.
Yes, yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So a little bit of a nod, intentional or otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one to compare it with. Yeah,
So
but yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask one more question about the book. I was curious. Do you feel, so you mentioned there was a direct influence on the character of Jimbo, but really not for Adam. How much of the characters in the book are really drawn from life or people you knew versus kind of archetypes or composites that you came up with in your head?
Well, one of the characters in the book, Jay, was based on someone I knew named John Morris. Was the name of the poor man passed away. He had bad diabetes. They had to take his leg off. He was in a wheelchair, and he was a bully. He was a grammar school bully, but he had a heart, and that's true of Jay as well. Jay is the adopted brother. If you recall, he was the wasn't the ringleader, but he was one of the two guys with Jimbo that abused Adam in the lake and the laundromat. And he's very macho, and he was very, very. He had a really kind of a deranged way of thinking. The cops arrested him once because he opened the Presbyterian church's announcement board, and he wrote Satan rules on it in big letters. you know, God, this and that, Jesus Christ, and then it would have the masses, and then he wrote Satan rules on it. He had a very sick sense of humor when he was young, but again, he came from a broken family. His mother died young. He lived with the father, and he didn't abuse his father or vice versa, but he had no direction, and he wound up being put into the Verano house. And he's the one at the end of book 2 who always starts calling Adam she. He calls Adam angel and she and Pell. And the wife says, "Why do you keep calling him she? He's a he." But yeah, I never really recognized her as Adam. And so there's that whole gender identity thing that's examined in that book, is that towards the end of book 2, a couple of members of the family, Jay and the sister Jennifer, they basically refer to Adam as a girl, and he's a father of 3 daughters, but because of his ways and coming out the way he did and his wife's urging, they call him she and a girl, which is just symbolic anyway. But Jay was a bully even more than Jimbo was in that first book in the early chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Jay was Jay, and he changes his name to Jay Ferrano, and then when he becomes part of their family, J. Adam Ferrano, he calls himself.
Because he went so much back and forth, I got very frustrated with him. The other ones, it was almost like you kind of knew what you were dealing with, like they were bullies and then they were redeemed, or they were
right.
Where they went, but he kind of redeemed and then sinks back down and redeemed and sinks back, to the point where it was like I almost didn't trust him at the end, because
yeah, you know what,
he's gone back and forth so many times.
You're right to think that way, because every time he said he was going to protect Adam, something would set him off, because what I was trying to do there was to present a kind of an insecure mindset, because he's this macho guy who's very adverse of feminine guys, of homosexuals, and those kind of things are big turnoffs with him.
But he almost kind of embraces it by the end with
his
relationship to Adam.
Yes,
It's like he's almost
I deliberately did that. And you know what? There won't be any further
Hmm.
relapses with him in book 3. There won't be
Interesting.
any further relapses. He kind of, he spent this time going back and forth because he was unsure in his mind the way he felt. We
Yeah.
knew that he loved Adam, but he didn't want to say it. He didn't want to show this in the midst of Adam's cosmetic reinvention. He didn't want to, in the beginning, say that he favored this. He thought as a father of 3 girls, and he didn't know that at the time that the wife had advised this, and she had her reasons for doing it. But yeah, I mean, you could even say that Jay's playing musical chairs there was kind of inconsistent, or that it didn't make a lot of sense, but
Well, no, it had a
still,
certain psychological sense to it. It just made me, and I'm not saying this as a criticism, just an observation. It
yes,
almost made me dislike the character more than some of the more straightforward bullies in a way.
right.
By way of transition, I'll just say for those listening, we had a discussion about Alan Fish earlier in the discussion that unfortunately I think did not get recorded. I'll double check, but if we lost that, I will link his Fish Obscura reviews in the show notes, which was something we talked about, where he revealed all these great obscure titles that he'd seen over the years. So sadly, if that part of the conversation is missing, you can at least follow the link to that work. But I want to use that as a transition to ask you a little bit about what you've seen recently, Sam. I know even just today or the past few days, you saw some films that you feel like are going to be on your year-end best of lists, maybe up for award contention and things like that. So give us a little bit of the Sam Giuliano scoop.
Yes. Well, there was a point in time where I thought that a film that I had seen months ago, uh, a very affecting and superbly made South Korean film called Past Lives, which is still one of my favorite movies this year. But I thought it came out, opened up in June stateside, and it's getting still a lot of buzz, and people are expecting it'll be nominated for Best International Feature, and maybe it'll win some critic awards. But it's a very, very effective film. Technically, writing, acting, it's a very moving, beautifully made film about somebody who's trying to find out, her genetics, who she really is, and who was her real father, and she searches for him, uh, father and mother. But then we had a cultural phenomenon that came out maybe 2 months later, a few months later, and that was called Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did see Barbenheimer over a weekend after it had opened. I saw both films in successive days. I liked both of them. I probably liked Barbie more than most people, but it's. I mean, it was obviously a gimmick film, but it was certainly very colorful and fun. That did a lot of great work with feminism and so on. But it was Oppenheimer, which I saw the following day, which stayed with me even more. And I'm not the biggest Christopher Nolan fan. I liked 2 of his films prior to this. I liked Interstellar, and then I didn't like it in the beginning, but now I like it quite a bit. Dunkirk. Those were the 2 films by Christopher Nolan I liked. And Oppenheimer certainly ranks up there with his best work. The lead performance is going to be a major contender for Best Actor. The film for Best Picture. It'll probably be considered for critic awards. It's a real long film. Of course, we know what that's about. I don't have to explain, but obviously, it's about the guy who created the atomic bomb, that was used on two Japanese cities in World War II. That it's a period piece biography, very well done considering its length. And then I saw a few films that were decent online, but I wasn't hitting the theaters often. I saw the new Kenneth Branagh or Agatha Christie adaptation based on Halloween Party, which they changed the name of it, Haunting in Venice, which was decent, but not, again, not on any best list. It just probably was the best of the three adaptations. But then in the last weeks, I started getting in the act with seeing the prestige pictures, and I liked the movies that I saw quite a bit. Martin Scorsese's uh, Killers of the Flower Moon, which is a 3.5 hour movie about one of the most shameful episodes in our history, is when the Indian tribe that founded oil, and they got wealthy, and then there was a certain person who orchestrated killing them one by one. It was just a horrifying, uh, brutal film that Martin Scorsese employed his violent set pieces. But it was a very affecting and very, very well done. We used footage, old footage, and documentary footage he mixed in, and you got some great performances, especially by Lily Gladstone. But the two, DiCaprio, De Niro, very, very good, and certainly that film will be nominated for Best Picture. It'll probably win a few of the critical awards. I loved it a lot. I thought it was my favorite movie of the year until this very day, this afternoon. I have a new number 1 movie. Here we are, almost in November. I'm wondering if it'll stay the course, and that's Alexander Payne, who gave us Nebraska, About Schmidt, Election, and of course, maybe his best film to date, Sideways. But this movie, The Holdovers, certainly ranks with it. But I was told by some close friend who's a film writer, of course you're going to like it, Sam. It's about an inspirational teacher, even if he is a curmudgeon, but he's inspirational. About a student who has personal issues, and the teacher, does everything he could to straighten him out. It's set in 1971. It's set at a boys' prep school. Every button that this picture hit for me. And then on top of it, you have Alexander Payne, whose neorealism kind of stuff, he's a very, very talented director. I don't know whether you like him or not, but he's a talented director. And this movie, The Holdovers, is going to be a major player for critical awards and for the Academy Awards. Paul Giamatti is going to be up for Best Actor, neck and neck with DiCaprio and Gillian, what's his name?
Murphy, yeah.
Right, yeah. Gillian Murphy from Oppenheimer. So it's between Murphy, DiCaprio, and Giamatti, from what I'm reading. Giamatti was wonderful.
Paul Giamatti hasn't won an award yet, right? Did he win Best Supporting for anything?
No, he's never won any.
Never won. Yeah. Okay. And the other, or Cillian Murphy has not, of course.
Yeah.
DiCaprio's got 2, right? Or
no, just the one for the Revenant. Only one.
Okay.
Been nominated a lot of time. The supporting actress, who's played by, and her name is difficult to pronounce. She plays the cook in the movie. She's an African-American woman, very, very big, very, very wide, heavy set woman. And she's the favorite. She's the number 1 favorite at Awards Daily to win Best Supporting Actress for The Holdovers, for this film. So it's in contention for some major awards, and Payne will be up for it. I also saw the movie.
Actually, before you tell me the next one, I got a random question about that one, because I saw the trailer. Is the trailer designed to look like a 70s trailer just as kind of a gimmick, or is the whole movie, stylized to that extent? Because they make it look like it's like a trailer from 1974 or something. the font, the music, the even the grain of the film, or the whatever effect they use if it's shot digitally. Is the whole film like that, or is that more just how they kind of promoted it?
Well, that trailer, I've seen that trailer, and that trailer properly sets the film in that era. The
Yeah.
textures, the music. So yeah, no, throughout the film, cars, everything. The Payne did a lot of had his art directors do their work. You do get the feeling you're back in the early 1970s,
Does the
1971.
film itself kind of like, does it have like, is it cut and shot though in a way like the trailer was, or was that more of just like a wink and a nod
Oh
kind of?
no, it wasn't cut and shot that way. No,
Okay,
no,
okay.
no,
I
no,
was just
no.
curious because I was like, that is definitely an aesthetic decision there.
It's it's a combination of you got Dead Poet Society in there. You got a little bit of that other one, Mr. Opus. I guess you got a little bit of that, but this is a more down to earth, earthy thing,
Yeah.
and Yamadi is not extravagant at all. And he's not a flawless character by any means. He's a very difficult person to get along with.
Did he
But
did Payne
you
do any films between this and Downsizing with Matt Damon, where they shrink all the people and all that?
that might have been his last film.
Wow. And that people didn't like that one, but I kind of
Right.
I liked that. I thought it was interesting, and it was very ambitious. So kind of interesting. This is more, seems like a kind of a little more of like a character piece, slice of life kind of thing. Um
Did he
versus
do
that
that
was like
after
almost a sci-fi movie.
he did that after the Descendants?
Yeah, yeah,
The
which was also
Descendants
kind
came,
of
and then
slice.
Nebraska, then Downsizing,
I
and then
mean,
the
that's
Holdovers. He
yeah,
works
that's
very, very slow.
yeah, that and I feel like most of his films are that those kind of slice of life character study, with like sort of an arch style to them, but nothing too fantastical. And then Downsizing was like very out there in terms of what he usually does. And I guess it didn't seem like it went over well, but I don't know. I found I still think about it quite a bit, so it had some sort of effect on me, I guess.
Well, he did 8 films. He did 8. That's all he did. He did Citizen Ruth, Election, About Smith,
Yeah.
Sideways, The Descendants, Nebraska, Downsizing, and the Holdovers.
In
That's it.
30
He did.
years, yeah.
What's that?
I said over 30 years, so yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, since
uh,
1996.
yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean,
So what was the last film that that you saw today that you thought might be in contention for
well, no,
your favorite and maybe
yeah,
best picture?
I saw the Holdovers today. That was the one I saw today. It's last night
Oh, okay.
that I saw the Cannes Film Festival Palme d'Or winner, uh, which is Anatomy of a Fall. It's a courtroom drama, though it's set in mountainous Alps in this house, a very alluring setting in the
Hmm.
snow. But half of the movie is in English, which I was not aware of. I thought it would
Hmm.
be all in French. It's a French courtroom drama. But the director supposedly purposely made the woman who has some bad qualities. I think it's to the film's credit that it makes us root for her when she cheats on her husband with another woman. She's a bisexual, so she's treating on her husband. The husband dies at the end. The question is, was it suicide or not? And then the young boy, has to take the witness stand, and he's blind. The boy is about 12 years old, and he lost his eyesight at 4 years old. And he has a seeing eye dog who plays a pivotal role in it. It's a very gripping, uh, eerie kind of a movie. Bill Camberger said he saw it too. He said, I probably would have given it a higher rating if it didn't win the Palme d'Or. In other words, throws it. The film's greatness is kind of forced down his throat.
Yeah.
If he didn't, he didn't think maybe that it should be that kind of a. It's a good enough film. I think I liked it more than him, but I get where he's coming from. I
Yeah.
get it's probably going to be nominated for Best International Feature. It's probably going to be the favorite in that category, I would imagine. Usually, the Palme d'Or winners are like Parasite was, and Roma was, and others. Um, but it's a superior film. It keeps you gripped there. It's a I wasn't turning away from the screen. It was involving and it was challenging and so on. But I await the next couple of months and see what happens. There's surely going to be some independent films that have to come out that we haven't seen yet that are going to be major players in this whole thing. And some of them open in November and December. Late November, early December, and then later in the month. So we have a lot to really look forward to as far as what's left.
I
I would,
wonder I wonder to what extent too the SAG strike will affect what was going to come out, because if you get to like the point of December, like they went on strike in like May, I think, so you might start to get films that were I don't know, post-production can take a long time, so maybe not, but you might start to get films that were going to come out in December but were held off or whatever. So that could help. Or yeah.
I could give you some titles: Poor Things, and American Fiction, and Zone of Interest, Maestro, um, All of Us Strangers, The Killer, Saltburn, Priscilla, which is the Sofia Coppola movie with Elvis Presley next week that opens. The Bike Riders. All of these have to come out yet.
Yeah, and these are all completed, in the can, made it through before there was any strikes or anything. So they're all ready to go. So next year will probably be the year that gets really sort of like 2020 with the pandemic. It's like that's going to be such a weird year to look back on. Like honestly, I'm not even sure of that many like and granted I don't follow contemporary films that closely, but even just like cursory knowledge, like trying to figure out what came out that year, it's like it's tough because it's like other than Tenet, nothing was really coming out in theaters. It was like very everything got kind of pushed back to the following year. So it's strange times. Strange times we're living in.
Yeah, that happened, and I wouldn't want to make any list yet until we get to the end of December, because there will be some other films that will be, I'm sure, outstanding. And just in the international film category alone, there'll be several that'll come out as the year winds down. So, I gave you a list of films that I like, but there'll be enough to engage with in the upcoming weeks.
Who do you think is the front runner for Best Actress?
Well, they're saying the name that keeps coming up is Emma Stone.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, she was in La La Land, of course.
Yeah.
But her name keeps popping up that she's a major player, and I'm trying to remember the title of the film. I thought I may have mentioned it before. Poor Things. Poor Things is the name.
Okay.
Of it. And
interesting.
The other ones that would be contending with her would be the likes of like Lily Gladstone for the Scorsese.
Will that be actress or supporting actress?
No, actress.
Definitely actress. Okay.
Actress.
That makes sense. Yeah, she seems like she's really important. I haven't seen it yet, but hoping to see that soon and maybe do a Patreon review of it or a discussion with somebody. But yeah.
The lady that was in the movie last night is going to be in the 5 too. Sandra Huller.
Okay.
Plays the lead in Anatomy of a Fall.
Sandra Huller. What else was she in?
Sandra Huller?
Yeah. Why is
I'm
that
not familiar. I'm not familiar with her work.
I'm gonna pull it up. Oh, okay. She was in Tony Erdmann, which I just saw.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I finally caught up with that.
I really enjoyed that. Well,
that was a fun one. Yeah, okay. I was thinking that was her. Yeah, okay. That would be interesting if she was up there for that. Do you think Margot Robbie will be in the top 5?
Well, her name's been mentioned in Barbie, yeah, but she's usually 6 or 7. She's mentioned as 6 or 7.
It's tough because like I feel like some of the supporting performances were kind of given more time in a way. Certainly Ryan Gosling, but also like America Ferrera to a certain extent. She got the big monologue, you know.
Right.
But I thought Margot Robbie was great. I'd love to see her up there. I do feel like they're gonna want to honor Barbie quite a bit, at least with nominations, because it was such a great moment for the industry, and it would be kind of. I feel like it would end up seeming kind of weird if they nominated it for all these awards and they didn't give Barbie herself at least a nomination. So politically speaking, I feel like that that could help that out. You know, if her and Cillian Murphy get it, then it's like, okay, we recognize Barbie and Oppenheimer themselves in the top categories besides the films. But man,
Yeah, no,
there's a
sure,
million
yeah.
actors in the ensembles of both of those. Oppenheimer, I mean, yeah, certainly. Do you think Downey Jr. will be the supporting actor favorite?
He's presently considered the favorite to win that award, yes. Ruffalo is number two, and Ryan Gosling of Barbie is number
Right.
three.
What does your gut tell you for among those at this? I mean, I know we're like 6 months out, but out of curiosity.
In supporting actor?
Yeah, what if you had to go with just your instinct? Who do you
Well,
think they'll favor?
Downey was up there, and I of the ones I saw, I thought Matt Damon was good in Oppenheimer as well.
Hmm.
And both Jesse Plemons and Robert De Niro were excellent in
Yeah.
Scorsese's movie. De Niro's being mentioned as a possible nominee
Okay, here's a random question for you. What is your favorite film of this decade so far since 2020? Like your personal favorite?
of this decade.
Yeah.
Um, it's a good question, but if we count it for 2020, I don't know. Never Look Away. It's a German film by the same director who gave us, Florian Henkel, The Lives of Others.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was a German film set during the war, but I don't think it's considered to be 2018.
Ah, okay, yeah. It came
Yeah,
out here
so I
later.
mean, I couldn't really count that as a.
Yeah. Well, 2019 had so many good movies, and then it was like boom, right into the pandemic.
Yes, then we had the pandemic that came after that. I'm trying to remember what my favorite movies were last year.
Did you like The Fablemans?
I did, but I don't count it as one of my favorites. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
good. The movie a movie called After Sun. It was an
I heard that.
independent film
I heard
by
that. Yeah, I heard
Charlotte
that was
Wells.
really good. I don't know that much about it, but I did hear it was really good.
It was last year.
Yeah.
I you know the decade is young yet. We've only had three
Yeah.
years, so it's hard to really say. I'd have to look on the list and all, but that was last year. I thought was a good year. We had All Quiet on the Western Front remake and The Quiet Girl, an Irish film, was excellent, and then Women Talking, I thought was very good. Um, Close was a Belgian film. An international film was very effective as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to make a list at some point because I just spent the past, I don't know, 6 months, a year, or whatever. I was catching up with a lot of 2010s films that I hadn't seen because I kind of wasn't seeing that many new movies then. So now it's like, now I got to catch up with the 2020s already.
There was a movie called The Whale
Oh
with
yeah, with the Aronofsky film.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't say I
I
missed that
liked it,
too,
but
but
I know not everybody did. Brendan Fraser won his
yeah,
Oscar for that.
yeah, I did see that. I watched that. I've been very spotty with the Oscars for about a decade in terms of I was actually I kicked myself in 2017 because when it was for the 2016 films, I tuned in to see if the OJ film was going to win best documentary because I thought that was a masterpiece. I thought that was one of the best
Right.
films of that decade and it did and I was happy and I ended up going to bed kind of early And then as I was sitting in bed, I just started scrolling through Twitter and people were reacting. It was like, oh my God, what happened? I turned it on and they'd just given the award to the wrong film for Best Picture. And I was like, oh, how did I miss this like legendary? They're like, and I said to myself, I said, there will never be an
Uh,
Oscar moment as crazy as this. And then lo and behold, what was it last year? Will Smith and the slap. I would say that
yeah,
surpassed it.
yeah. I
Surpassed
know.
it.
Unbelievable. Wow. And then you had that big upset when Anthony Hopkins won Best Actor.
Yeah, and he was even surprised in the
Yeah, he said
reception
he never
speech.
expected it. It went, I guess the British contingent was solid behind him, and
Yeah,
he somehow squeaked out a win over Chadwick Boseman.
yeah, yeah, and he had just died that year, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there have been some dramatic ceremonies. I mean, that one, the Will Smith slap one was like kind of a terrible broadcast. I remember like there were all these mess ups and like the jokes weren't landing and they had like different people coming out. Like I don't think they had one consistent. Oh no, Chris Rock was the host, right? Overall, no, he was presenting the award. Yeah, it was like I can't remember. It just seemed like it was like all over the place. Um, but it certainly was memorable.
I
So
hear you.
there's that. All right, well, I guess it's getting kind of late, so we'll let you I guess sign off with any last thoughts. Where I mean, obviously you're on wondersinthedark.wordpress.com, or can you go there with just
Yes, that's it.
wondersinthedark.com at
That's
this
the way
point?
to get to it.
With the WordPress, yeah. So we'll put that link in the show notes. And I'm also going to link up the decades countdown we talked about and the Fish Obscuros, because again, I fear that part of the conversation might have slipped away. I tried to record on my phone because of technical errors, which doesn't always work out. But what are some of the things upcoming on Wonders in the Dark which people should keep in mind or check out?
Well, right now we have this horror fest that Jamie Euler is doing capsule reviews
Mm-hmm.
of up until Halloween. He
Mm-hmm.
tries to do one a day, and then he sends them on an email chain with Maurizio Rocca and Marco Tremble in Britain. And sometimes we answer back and forth, but I print them on the Monday morning diaries. In fact, I did
Yeah.
do his latest batch this afternoon for tomorrow morning's diary. Usually, when we get to the end of the year, Dwayne Porter and one or two others like to do their top films of the year, and they do post. We still get contributions from James Clark, his film reviews. And then, of course, every year, but that's not until May, we do the Alan Fish tribute, every year. Uh, Everybody writes a film review of films that they found that are difficult to find. It's Alan Fish Online Festival. We do that every year.
I also note that you have been doing these music polls. Now, do you share the results always on Wonders in the Dark, or are those mostly through Facebook?
Yeah. Those music polls have been very, very successful. Many people are really wild to participate. And what I do is I that's a Facebook poll.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we're up to 1971. And as of this afternoon, I think about 45 or 46 full ballots, top 20, however you want to present them in order, alphabetically, chronologically, whatever. Everybody does it differently.
Yeah, you're
But we
getting a
can
lot of
tabulate.
votes on this. I'm looking at it right now. You got 418 votes for the top one, which I
For
will
which
let
one?
people. Should I tell them or should it be a surprise? Which one best?
Which one are you saying?
Oh, for 1970.
1970. Oh, we
Yeah,
already released the results for that.
exactly. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now and just
Yeah,
seeing.
we're doing 71 doesn't end until Wednesday.
Yeah. So what you're doing, just for the listeners, is year by year. So almost kind of like we did with movies at one point. We had a year by year movie poll,
Yes,
which
yes, we're going.
I've stored my choices on my site under the alternate Oscars page. But yeah, so now you're doing it with music with songs. And where would people find that on Facebook if they wanted to jump into that?
Oh, well, I mean, it's on my timeline. You just got to
Yeah.
scroll down. It'll have.
Okay.
I see somebody just handed in a ballot. Stairway to Heaven, Aqualung, What's Going On, Mercy, Mercy
They're
Me,
already there. I
White
like
Blue
it.
Eyes, and on and on and on.
Nice.
Imagine You've Got a Friend, Your Song, Brown Sugar.
Yeah, 1971. What a year.
And
Oh my
that's
God.
some year. Ooh.
For albums too.
Yep, that had it both for those. Yeah, oh yeah.
All right. Well, I will so just your Facebook profile basically, and that's the link.
What's that?
If people want to vote in that, just visit your Facebook profile.
Yes, on
Okay.
the
I'll
on the
put that in the
comment
show
thread,
notes too. Yeah.
or you just go to Wonders in the
Oh,
Dark.
okay. Oh, well, I'll link that
Go to
then.
the
Yeah.
comment section
Makes
of the
sense.
any diary. Just say these are my top 20.
Gotcha.
Do them,
Okay.
and then I will transfer it to the Facebook page for
Perfect.
tabulation.
All right. So all through Wonders in the Dark. Anything else
Okay.
that you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I will. I will copy and paste that ballot on the tabulation page on Facebook.
Or no, is there anything else that you just wanted to share with
Oh, no.
listeners in terms of
No.
yeah.
I'm happy with the discussion. We covered a lot of
We
ground.
did, yeah. Sorry it
Yeah,
ended up going a little later than we
yeah,
thought.
it happens. It happens.
Boy, the
So
Zoom was brutal. I know if I tried to sign in again right now, it would do the same damn thing, I'm pretty sure. I don't know what the issue is, but anyways, we'll leave that part out. They don't need to hear all the gory details of Zoom. But thank you so much for joining me. This was great, and I'm glad we've sort of collaborated and overlapped so much in the past. So it was fun to do it in audio form this time as well, and
yes, I
kind of
thought
leave
it
that
was
marker in the
wonderful.
sand.
I thought it was wonderful. I'm very appreciative that you spent the time doing this, reading the book, and you were very humble about everything. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Sam, and I'm glad I got to see you recently in New York, and hopefully
We'll be in touch.
again soon. Sounds good. All right.
Thank you.